Well, welcome back to the dispatch. Excited to have our guest Kyle here. Kyle, welcome to Appleton. Welcome to the Blue Floor, and welcome to the dispatch.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you having us up here. We enjoy our trips every time we come to Appleton and Pierce and the hospitality that you guys show us.
Oh, thanks a ton. Well, it's nice that we get to steal you away from the Blue Floor and your time here, so we can get you on the podcast. Tell me a little bit about what you're accomplishing on your trip here, Kyle.
Well, we're up here doing our final on our heavy rescue. First time the Lexington County Fire Service has ever bought a heavy rescue, so we spent a lot of time specking this truck out and I kind of joked about it. It's been a 9 months or so since we were up here for pre-con, and so it's like having a baby. We've been waiting on it and waiting on it, and seeing those ultrasound pictures that come in every week or so just did not do this truck justice. So very excited to be here and spend some time going over this first of a kind for our county.
That's funny that you describe it as delivering a baby. We talk about that like when people get their new delivery photo. Like this is the best it's ever gonna look. Like it's in its perfect condition at that point before anything happens to it or it starts getting the wear and tear on it. And so it's funny to hear someone describe it from their perspective that way as well. So you said first time going through the rescue process, but you've been here before on other build?
I have. I'm fortunate to the departments I've been with have been longtime Pierce customers. My sales guy Trey and I were in North Charleston together, and we're Pierce customers there. And moving to Lexington County about 6 years ago, we made the transition. I guess 4 years and 5 years now, Trey it was, and to change vendors, and the service after the sale has just been top notch. And so moving to a company that we've had a relationship for a long time with a quality product has been a benefit to us. And we ended up doing a 20 truck order. And this heavy rescue is one of 20. We've already accepted 5 engines, and a mobile command post has already been accepted, and 4 tenders. So we're running the gamut with Lexington County and Pierce. So pretty
Well, we
excited.
really appreciate it. Well, whether it's 1 unit or 20, like in that case, it's on us to earn it every time. So we really appreciate that. And the kind words about Spartan, they do a
They
fantastic
do.
job there in South Carolina.
Robbie has been a longtime friend of the fire service in the state, and I tell him this every time. It doesn't matter what patch I've ever worn; he's always been a dedicated South Carolinian and gives back for anybody, whether you're a customer or not. He always gives back to our state's fire
Yeah,
service.
you can feel it when you go. I went to the state show when it was in Columbia
Yep,
a few years back, and you can feel that there. Like you could hear the way customers engage and the questions that they have, and they really treat them like a member of their department and a member of the fire industry, which is really neat. I mean, being a multi-generational business like that, it's about as fun as it gets. Well, tell me a little bit about what I want to focus on our conversation is really, obviously you have some experience on different departments, different fleets, things of that nature, different size departments, different size fleets. Can you tell me a little bit about what it's like to get that committee together that's gonna make that decision around the apparatus?
Those committees make my job so much easier. I can go in front of council or go to my boss and ask for money. And they give me the ammunition I need to go ask for what we really need. But the committee, just putting those group of firefighters and engineers and captains together to have buy-in.
Mhm.
I can go out and buy a truck, but without their buy-in, they don't take care of it. They're not invested into it. And what we found is our committees work hard because they feel like they have ownership and they have buy-in, and they see a little bit of themselves in there. And I learned that, from our previous department, is that, you see that part right there. I thought about that, and that's mine. That's my truck. And when it came time to washing it or taking care of it, they were invested and owned it. And so it's good to have those committees because they do the research. And when I don't have time to think about what's new out there in the industry, they're out at FDIC or they're going to FRI, and they're coming back and saying, "Did you see what Pierce released? Or did you see what the hose looks like?" Or whatever it is, and they just invest a lot of that. It takes that workload off of me, and now I have all the data I need to go in front of council to say, "All right, we're moving to this line of fire apparatus. We need this much money because we need it to function this way.
Sure.
This is why." So all the committees we have, training or apparatus equipment, just take a lot of workload off the chief officers, so we could do our day to day job of getting them the funding they need to buy this stuff.
Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit more about the considerations that you make when you're selecting a committee. Maybe you could do it even through the lens of recently switching departments. You're coming in and, "Hey, it's time that we go and procure apparatus or look at this." Let's say it's a blank slate. How are you forming that committee?
I'm very fortunate. I have a committee chair. He's a battalion chief, Chief Glover, and he is very intimate with the fire trucks, and he has been on the committee for many years. And I'm talking about the times we were having FMC trucks, and the various vendors. And so I put a lot of trust in him, and so, he reaches out every year. We do it yearly and say, "Okay, who's interested in being on the apparatus committee? You know, send me your name and a little bit about yourselves," because we're a large organization with 311 full-time employees, so we don't know everybody's intimate, what their backgrounds are, and so he'll reach out and he'll assemble a team, and he looks at every rank. So we want a firefighter on there because I want to know where the hose needs to be for the crosslays, or what kind of stack are we going to run this time. We got an engineer on there. What are you looking for at your pump panel? What are you looking for when you drive the apparatus? The company officer. What do you need to see from that front right seat? And so we assemble that to make sure we have a cross representation of each rank and each shift within our organization. And we look at some of their background because, a lot of our younger, less tenured firefighters, and my son's 21. I would tell you that he's a firefighter in a neighboring department, but to ask him to spec out a truck when he drives a Honda Civic is probably not the right guy. So, but we want him on there because of the technology piece. It's so amazing that these trucks have gotten advanced with computers and the MUX systems, and we want a USB here, or we need to put something there, and so we look at that to get that youth on there, and we look to get the more tenured folks on there who have a background because our community is partly rural. They've farmed, or they've worked on tractors, or they've driven, trucks over the road. And so we got a Duke's mixture on this committee so we can bounce ideas off each other and educate. Now, these younger firefighters, well, I don't understand about, the engine. Why do we go with the pack car over a Cummins? Well, let me tell you why. Here's the foot pounds, the torque, and so it gives them an opportunity now to better understand. So when they become the company officer, even though they have a background in farming or tractors or anything, they have a little bit more exposure, experience, and they can make those decisions moving forward.
Talk to me a little bit about the mix of your committee and who all you put on there. I mean, I think specifically in this situation, you're obviously here working on a rescue. So, is there a different committee for your rescue than you would have had on the aerial or the engines?
Totally. And the guys here today with me, they are the ones that's going to potentially be on the first heavy rescue, but they're very well versed in it. Firefighter Janitas has a private company, and he goes and teaches all over the country. And he's big into saw work and truck work and rescue work. And man, he came into this thing at pre-con. I thought your engineers were going to lose their mind with him. He's like, why can't we do this? And let me show you what I've seen. And he is just deep down into it. And Captain Roberts is on our SE Task Force One in South Carolina. So he has a lot of exposure and experience to the roping and the rigging and the various things that we need to have this truck function, from the aspect of where we put the anchor points. We got 6 anchor points on this truck, and we put them in a specific location, working with the engineers to make sure it would meet the rating load that we needed to do. When we sat down and we looked at the compartment, we said, we want to have so many airbags in here. And they were very specific on the measurements and make sure the engineer could function and put it in there. And for the most part, the engineers were very like, well, we can do that. We can do that. And there was one thing that was like, yeah, we can do that, but that's going to delay your truck about 6 months downstream. And we're like, okay, we could figure out a way around it. So having those guys to understand why the winch needed to be here, or the airbags here, or the struts in the rear of the truck was a definite benefit. And we've done the same thing with the ladder guys. We got guys who would rather ride a ladder truck and stay the heck away from pulling hose. And so we put them over as we've worked on our Ascendant that's being built. So those guys were intimately involved, and although it's a stock unit, we still got them involved to
Mhm.
say, "Here's some of the things we can do. Here's a lot of the things we can't do because we're on a time constraint with the truck." And the same thing with the engines. We have a lot of good engine guys out there who spend a lot of time understanding the hydraulics and wanting to know why we pipe a truck a certain way out of the pump housing, or why we don't straight pipe it, or those type of things. So we do specialize within our committee, and we have a lot of guys do a lot of research so they're well versed in it.
What about other functions on the department, like the ones that maybe the traditional committee might not think about, like on the maintenance side or the mechanics? Do you include them on your committees?
We did years ago. The county, all the fleet is purchased by the fleet director, and we've broken that mold because there were times where our fleet director, and I'm speaking very deep history, 10, 15, 20 years ago, would help us spec a truck that didn't meet our needs. And we broke away from that, and we work with our fleet now to say, okay, here's what we're specking. Here's the motor. I need you to get your guys prepared to work on a pack car because we've moved to that from the Cummings. They have been receptive to that, or we looked at the pump and said, maybe we want to move to a waterless pump, and you need to get your guys up to speed on that.
Sure.
So we keep them involved, but we didn't bring them on to drive it because it was driven by mechanics and not necessarily the use of a firefighter. And so we had spec trucks that were not as user friendly on our end. They were very user friendly to work on, and that wasn't what we wanted for our fire apparatus.
That's interesting because you kinda have to balance that where everyone has influence, but someone ultimately has the
Right.
final say. So, like, when you're forming the team, do you establish a leader? Is it like a
I
leader of
do.
it?
The equipment, the apparatus committee leader is Chief Glover. He runs it. He comes to every build, and he's on the backside of his career. So we are working heavily with two captains now that have about 10 to 15 years left before they can retire. And so we're grooming them now to take his spot. I've got 3 to 5 years. I'm getting a guy ready to take my spot. And so we're starting to groom that next generation to understand, pre-con. Why is it so important that we go sit down with an engineer? Because we need to tell them we're going to put X number of pounds of equipment into this compartment. Will it work? And to go through that spec with a fine tooth comb, and then to come up here again and go back through that spec with a fine tooth comb to say, okay, it was in the spec that we were going to have a handrail. Well, it's not here. Why not? And we need to add it back in so that they understand it's not that we're up here at a battle with our sales rep or with peers. We're up here to say, this is a truck we agreed upon. This is a truck you built. Okay, that's exactly what we wanted. And we're getting them to understand that part of it because a lot of them don't see it. They just know we buy a truck and it rolls in and it's pretty. And we're getting them to understand the backside. There's a lot of work that goes into specing on a fire
Yeah.
truck.
It's one of the ones I always laugh about when you walk in, particularly on somebody you mentioned on doing your pre-con for this rescue. And I think there's this, like, stereotype or perception, if you will, that when people come to Appleton, and don't get me wrong, the people eat well when they're here. Like, I think everyone can agree that they're fed well when they're here, but they think it's all dinners
Yeah.
and whatever else. And the amount of work that goes into a pre-con and a final inspection where it is line by line, item by item, and you, like, look at, like, the coffee cups piling up and the
Right.
energy drinks around the table and all that, and, like, just the full whiteboards of everything that went into every detail of it, like, those committees work.
Right, and we've got it down to a science. We're a quick breakfast in the morning, grab a Chick-fil-A biscuit and wait. I wanna be at the plant no later than 7:30. Lunch, if we get it, great. If we don't, we'll figure it out later, and then when 5 or 6 rolls around, if we're not done, we're here till we are, and our committee understands that, I love coming up here because when we're not in the conference room doing a pre-con or we're not checking out a truck, we're walking your factory. You're so receptive to us walking around and just looking at everything. And I will tell you, I steal so many ideas when I'm up here. And I look at a fire truck. We were up here on our engine. There was a Baltimore, I think it was Baltimore City or Baltimore County sitting beside us, and their hose bed was like, man, that is the perfect hose bed. How
Yeah.
can I incorporate that and get my committee to lower our hose bed even more and try to keep water? And so they don't know that we're up here on this floor from usually 7 to at least 5 or 6 in the evening.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, we do eat well. You can't beat the cheese curds in Wisconsin.
No.
That's the best thing going. But the work that's put in is much appreciated by staff or our people, and it's really there's days I leave more tired being up here sitting in a pre-com because of the amount of brain power that goes into trying to figure this out than you do when you're at work.
It's exhausting.
It is, and
Yeah.
it's a lot of thought. And even on the rescue, we had this to our point. It was the perfect spec, and we were looking at it a few minutes ago with your team, and we're like, something's not right on this door. It's missing a handle, and he goes, "Yeah, this is why." And he opens it up, and we're like, "Oh, why didn't we think about that at pre-con? We could have flipped the ladders and did a little different." And notes.
Sure.
Next rescue, we will put the 24 here and the straight ladder here and the pike poles here to make that change. And so there's a lot of that that goes into it for that 8 to 10 hours you're here. And it's not just, hey, let's go to dinner or let's go to, look at the Fox River flow or whatever it
Right,
is. So,
right, and I mean, when you talk about rescue specifically, we like to give the rescue team gas from time to time that, "Hey, it's just a box of air," or whatever the case is, but they are super custom.
oh
I mean,
yeah,
when you go through there and they're still bay built, and one of the things that I think is neat about that when you talked about building a committee around that and including members that actually run on the rescue, I'm, like, convinced that there's, like, a cultural match between the team that builds the rescues and designs the rescues and the men and women that run the rescue, because 'cause they're just built different,
they are. And
and
they're
they just that attention to detail you'd mentioned.
that team, when we came up for pre-con, we were standing there watching, and they were so amenable to letting us stand there. They stopped work and said, "What questions do you have?" And we started asking questions, and we were in the process of building the mobile command post, and I could just and even that internal, well, we're the best, Appleton's the best place to build anything. I was like, yeah, but we have a mobile command that's an enforcer chassis that's going down the front line. Yeah, we're still the best up here, and that attention, that is great to
Yeah,
have. I had
swagger
it.
almost.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
have it with our 25 fire stations. Everyone's the best, and, I want that, and I like that kind of competition, lack of a
Yeah.
better term. It was great to be on the floor, and that guy's like, "I built the best rescue. You're not gonna get anything better out of what you're, out of any other plant,"
Yeah.
to see what they've delivered out here. And that box of air ours is a little bit different. It has a little water on it, but we want to kind of keep that secretive, because it won't be a true rescue with
Sure.
water. But they were able to walk over here and just their pride in what they developed and built
Yeah.
it shouldn't amaze me by now as much as I've been up here and have been on part of the on a fire apparatus from Pierce, but it truly still amazed me that you got a 35-year employee beaming every time they
Yeah.
work on a fire truck. I'm like, "Gosh, 35 years." You'd be like, "Man, this is just a job," but it
Yeah.
never is.
But
And
you get that in the fire service too, though.
oh, yeah,
Like, like,
it's
when you talk
it's
about that competition, like, you want your
oh,
department to
yeah,
say, "Hey, aerials are better." Like, my truck company will run circles around the engine company, and my rescue company is the best and the baddest.
always,
I mean, that's what you want.
always. Even our truck says so. Our patch on the truck says "Best in the Midlands," and
Is it
that
really?
oh, yeah, that's a shot to say we are the best. Now define best in my mind. We are the best in the Midlands, but that's to stir a little bit of the pot internally and externally, 'cause it's the fire service. We like to jab, but it is good that they have that pride and honor. It goes back to that original statement. These committee members, they take pride in these
Yeah.
trucks. They take it serious that I spent a lot of time away from my family the last 3 days. I spent a lot of time at the fire station really researching, "This is mine. I own this," and your team's the same way. It's
Yeah.
like they turn out a truck, they may never see it again, but they own that truck. Their thumbprints on it
Yeah.
for the entirety of that truck's in existence.
Yeah, I walked by rescues one time, and there's a gentleman there, and he keeps opening and shutting the rear stairs, the stairway to heaven that goes up
Right,
and back, and he's just clicking it over and over and over again, and I kinda walked by one way, I think I was on a tour or whatever it was, and I'm walking back, and he's still doing it, so I was like, "Alright, I gotta ask him." So I went up and I asked him what he was doing. He goes, "Well, I just don't like the way it sounds."
right,
And so he is sitting there slamming this over and over again and making micro adjustments just so it sounds right. And all I could think is like, "Yeah, you're in the right place of this building. You're a
yeah.
rescue guy through and through." That's just the stuff. So what should a department consider when they're evaluating their community's needs when they're procuring an apparatus?
Well, you wanna know what the needs are. We're a vast urban, suburban, rural community, and so we know that when we developed this specific apparatus, it was going into the urban corridor of Lexington, and we wanted to make sure that it was able to move through the streets and function because it's probably not gonna go into the rural unless there's just a definitive heavy entrapment or some type of just fine space or event that requires that special ops component. So you wanna really look at what your roads and your community and your demographics. And Lexington County has 6 or 700 miles of dirt roads. That truck's not designed to go down a dirt road, but we know we can get it down there if we need to. And just taking that into consideration with the overall height and the length and where we're trying to put these trucks and the mobile command kind of caught us off guard. We ended up having to throw in a 16 by 16 door because it was just so tall. So we know now that we're limited in certain areas of the county with that truck, but wasn't designed to go into the rural for the most part. We designed it to be in that urban core and to deploy for a long duration or a long period for an operational period of mass events. So you definitely want to know what your community is. And most fire chiefs and most committee members know their community intimately. They've either worked there or they live there their whole lives. And so they want to design a truck that meets the needs. Sometimes we look at these fire apparatus and think, FDNY or Chicago or LA and you know, bigger's not always better sometimes, and our rescue's pretty big, but, think about our pumpers. I wanna make sure I got the shortest wheelbase to keep the compartmentation I need, and we talk about that a good bit now with the 6th engine being built, it's a little longer than I want, so we've already started tweaking our 7th, 8th, and 9th engine and 10th engine before we get to pre-con, so when we meet with your engineers, we're saying, "Look, we wanna bring this overall length in," because we know the longer the trucks are, the harder we're having to get them into some of the tight rural areas of the county, and when we buy a truck knowing it's gonna probably be in our fleet for 15 years, and as we push them out to the slower companies, they end up in the rural areas, so a long fire truck doesn't work for us, so we wanna start condensing that wheelbase down, so just knowing where you're gonna do with these trucks afterwards and how you're gonna use them for the life of the truck is a big benefit.
When you talk about that, I mean, it gets into capital replacement and all those elements. Can you talk to me a little bit about how does your committee keep local government updated? Municipalities, or what's the best practices to working with the local government?
I'm very fortunate. They don't really deal with a lot of the politics, and we kinda keep that not away from on purpose because we want them to be engaged and understand that we have non-council members that we have to educate, and I have a county administrator that is super supportive of the fire service and sitting down and saying, "NFPA says a fire truck needs to last this long. Here's the cost," and we know their costs are going up every year, and they're gonna continue to do so. And so we've sat down and tried to map out what we're wanting for a front line and what we want for a reserve. And we've done well this year. We were able to skip 1 year as much as I didn't want to skip a year because of the build times. We skipped a year to get ready for fiscal year 26, 27 to start the process again. And we know we need 2 engines a year to maintain our fleet. And then every third year, we need a specialty piece. And with the build times of specialty pieces, we may have to back that up to say we need a specialty piece ahead of the 2 engines because of the 46-month or whatever the build time is currently. But we let them know that each year we have to put at least 2.5 to $3 million in some type of asset for the county. And that's only going to grow because we have 2 stations under construction. We're adding that heavy rescue. So we'll be at 28 companies by the end of 26, early 27. And so that's got to play into the fact too that we may now need to do 3 assets a year, whether it's X number of dollars, and we'll figure out if it's a ladder truck and an engine, or is it going to be all engines this year? Is it going to be that one off year that we're building another heavy rescue to replace the one on the floor?
Yeah. How about I know that obviously, like, keeping the local government updated and varies from location to location or committee to committee, but ultimately, it's the taxpayers that are making this
Right.
decision. So how do you manage the budget throughout this?
Well, that's been a change for me. I'm an ops chief originally before I became the fire chief, and ops chiefs don't care about money. My counterpart used to just be upset. I think I almost caused them to have a heart attack multiple times. We were up here 1 year and we added a bell to the fire truck, and we didn't tell him that how much that bell cost, and it really didn't matter, I guess, at the time as an ops chief. But now I really want to balance the needs of the community with the needs of the organization. And then there's also some wants. I can cut this truck down to a bare bone truck and save a ton of money, but it doesn't mean it's going to be as functional. And then there's that buy-in piece. So if we can give them a little bells and whistles, it's always good to do that to keep them engaged and involved. But to let the taxpayers know we're not up here just spending money for the sake of spending money. But we built a very functional fire truck, and it doesn't have a lot of extra bells and whistles. It has exactly what we need to accomplish the task for today and the future moving forward. And so we want to get our community engaged. We invited them to fire stations. We did a large fire prevention event with all of our new Pierces last year, kind of all rolled in the 5 engines, the heavy rescue. So we did a large event and invited the community to come see your fire trucks, that these are your assets that you're spending a lot of money on, that we're getting 10 years front line, 15 years front line, depending on where they are in the county. We want you to see and be engaged, because when I do go ask for something more, I want you to understand why. Is there a computer in that truck? How much does that air pack cost? How much does that pump panel cost? Those are good things to educate the community. It's not just because we want to build this gee whiz, Cadillac. We're looking for a Chevrolet that's a workhorse, and we're looking to really, have something our guys can be proud of and give them a little bit of frills at the same time. But that's tough for me because they'll come up with these great ideas, and I'm like, golly, we don't quite have that in the budget. But what can we do differently to meet the intent?
Okay. Well, then you said 10 to 15 years frontline. How do you maintain consistency then across your fleet?
That's been tough as we've changed over the years. Even the next engine has a slight tweak to it, and then the 7th through the 10th engines that we'll be going to pre-con early next year will have a slight tweak to it. But they're consistent as far as where we try to put our equipment, but we know we're going to tweak it. We went from ladder racks from a previous vendor on top of the trucks with the hydraulic ladder racks to ladder racks through the tank to ladder racks on the side now. And these tweaks have been from the line, what we need to do to make the truck more user friendly. Same thing with the hose. Right now we have speed lays back behind the cab. We're looking at now putting the hose lays back across the top of the pump panel so we can bring them down. So I think the tweaks are always going to happen. I don't think unless we do a fleet replacement program where I come to you and say, I need you to build me 21 engines identical right now.
Right.
We're always going to have those little bit of variances between our fire trucks. And I think that's okay, because I could still say LS3 is going to have this equipment in it. LS2 is going to have this equipment in it. It may look a little different because we know on the right side, we don't have full depth, full height compartments now. We have compartments underneath the ladder. So they're half compartments. But what we're storing in those full height, full depths, we can get in that half compartment. So the equipment's still there.
Did you have to do any of that with that stock unit that you said you're working on? I mean, is there gonna be a lot how you're gonna get that to still maintain some kinda consistency? I mean, you got 300 firefighters and you have one.
The stock unit, it's gonna be in the same station as the heavy, so it's gonna be in that spec ops station, so we were able, and what that truck was designed for was for another fire station originally, but because of the way the money came in and we had to have it spent before the end of '27, and just knowing the build time, and Pierce and Spartan was able to get us that stock unit, we tweaked it just enough, but we were able to move another ladder truck to another station that has more compartmentation, and we're not talking about much. The other truck is from a different vendor. It has slightly more cubic feet in it to get some equipment in. And I think had we gone and able to buy the truck, we'd have done it a little bit differently to get that cubic feet back. But it's a workaround worth
Mhm.
doing. We're getting a brand new ladder truck at the end of this year that's going to help fulfill the needs of the community. It didn't cost us more money specking it out and getting it to where we need it. It didn't give us more of that time to build. So we can make that work. And our committee has done a great job measuring the compartments, working with our vendor to get the blueprint and what we need to put
Yeah.
where and making it work. So the stock unit wasn't the first choice, but it was the best choice.
Yeah, and you're not alone in that with it being kind of what I would say like a non-traditional stock customer utilizing the stock program. I think over the last several years, particularly with lead times pushing out, there's been a lot of major fleets that have leaned on stock and the
Right.
dealers getting creative with the utilization of stock, which used to be a lot more emergency purchase type situations and someone got behind on this or they're getting a new station, whatever the case is, or a wreck, whatever that is. But what's interesting is getting the feedback from people that do them, and I'll have to bug you about it after you get it delivered, get it in service
Right.
for a while, is you hear a lot of really positive feedback on because it's a commonly built, truck through our facility
Yep.
and that they're the most common options. You actually see lower warranty claims, you see more in-service time, things of that, so I'll have to bug you about that when I see you next at one of these conferences.
The feedback I've gotten from the customers who have bought stock that Spartan has sold to has have very positive. I was up here, can't remember which trip it was, but one of the stock units was going to another fire department, a good friend of mine. So we climbed all over it, looked at it, and that was really what kind of sold us. I said, if we get this money, the stock's going to work. We'll make it
Yeah,
work. And we got to the point where we were thinking we could do a little bit more tweaks. And when we talked to Trey and the engineers, is like, yeah, we've already engineered it to have 3/4 height doors. You can't put full doors. And I'm a lap door guy. I hate
sure.
roll up doors. And that's just a
Perfect.
personal preference and a personal opinion. It's not your
Okay.
opinion or official, but I'd love to have lap doors on it. But at the end of the day, I'm not gonna not buy that truck because it doesn't have lap doors.
Mhm.
It's still gonna be very functional. It meets our needs. It's a mid-mount 100 foot. That's exactly what we need at that fire station. The compartmentation is not quite where I want it, but with it sitting beside that heavy rescue and all the compartmentation on there, it'd be perfect for a sister truck running with that rescue.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's great. Alright, well, tell me what piece of advice, if you give one piece of advice to someone who's new to apparatus speccing or apparatus procurement, what advice would you give them?
I would say first, if you do a committee, let them dream big. We have not dreamed for years, and now we're saying dream. This heavy rescue, nobody thought we'd have one. We didn't think we'd have a mobile command post. We didn't think we'd get into a good fleet replacement program. And when we started, it was all right, this truck has to do everything for the next 50 years. Well, no, dream big because we're going to keep fighting and asking for more stuff and get those guys the opportunity to go out and see what is new. From a chief's perspective, be willing to have those tough conversations to say, okay, I've only got $1 million, guys, and we have to stay within budget. And what frills can we cut first to keep what's necessity? And we ran into that with the heavy rescue. We were making some tough cuts on frills at the beginning because we knew that we wanted to put those poly boxes in the compartment and we wanted to add different shelving in there. And we knew if we put the shelving at this many dollars, that this frill was going to have to come off. And you gotta have those ability to say, "You know what? The usability comes first. It's cool to have a bell on the truck, but we're gonna cut a bell to get another shelf, or I want a light here, but it meets NFPA, so let's cut this light to get this here." And so that's a hard thing to do, and you gotta look at the committee and say, "You put a lot of work in, but now I gotta make a couple of these tweaks and a couple of these cuts because I want you to dream big." And you dream big. You dreamed about a $4 million fire truck on a $1 million budget, but have the ability to let them dream and design and go, but also have the thought process to say, this is where we have to be. Let's talk about the functionality and then we'll add the frills on later. And it's tough. I like a pretty fire truck, and that is a beautiful fire truck. It is well lit, it is well laid out, it is well thought, but we were able to stay in budget
Mm,
as well. And so if we had to cut, we already knew what frills were cutting.
mhm.
This frill's got to go because this is more important for the usability of that fire truck.
Yeah. Well, Kyle, I can't tell you how much I appreciate your
Yeah.
business, and on behalf of everybody at Pierce, just means a ton to us, and again, we look forward to continuing to earn that, and it's on us to do that, but Also, just appreciate jumping on the podcast. I learned
Yeah.
a lot getting to talk with you. I hope our listeners learn a lot, and we look forward to serving you and your community for a long time.
Well, we greatly appreciate it. We enjoy being here. We were looking forward to coming up in July for another pre-con, and later this year, I'm looking forward to getting that tower ladder off the assembly line. So moving forward, we got a lot of good things going on, and the relationship is strong, and we greatly appreciate all you do for us.
Absolutely. All right. Well, be safe.
Thank you.